My name is Stella Maris. I am 29 years old. I had dreamed of my wedding day since I was a child, always picturing white roses, a lace dress, and the man I adored waiting for me with eyes full of love. But when that day finally came, it turned out to be my worst nightmare. Please take a moment and subscribe to this YouTube channel, thank you. That morning, everything looked like the fairy tale I had carried in my heart. The church was decorated with soft candlelight, the pews filled with friends and family, and the organist rehearsing the familiar notes of "Here Comes the Bride." My bridesmaids whispered encouragement, adjusting the veil that trembled slightly because my hands were shaking. I told myself it was just nerves, that every bride felt this way before stepping into forever. When the doors finally opened, all eyes turned to me. The weight of every stare pressed down, but I smiled, forcing calm into my face. The end of the aisle, Dave Whitmore stood in his tailored suit, impossibly handsome, his sandy hair brushed neatly, his jawline sharp with determination. He was supposed to be my safe harbor, the man who once held me close on chilly autumn nights, promising me a love that would never waver. But as I walked toward him, something flickered across his expression. It wasn't awe. It wasn't love. It was discomfort, the kind of unease a person wears when they've already made a decision they can't take back. My steps slowed, confusion prickling under my skin. My father tightened his arm around mine, whispering softly, "Almost there, sweetheart." We reached the altar, and Dave barely touched my hands. His palms were cold, his grip stiff. My heart pounded, but I whispered, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned slightly, glancing down one of the pews where a figure sat, Chloe Harrington. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she and Dave broke up during college. Chloe was the kind of woman who made other women instinctively sit straighter, slim, polished, and effortlessly elegant, with cheekbones that caught the light like glass. She wore a fitted navy dress that revealed just enough to whisper confidence. I had invited her out of courtesy when Dave suggested it, never imagining she would even show up. Then everything shattered. Dave cleared his throat, his voice carrying over the congregation. "I can't do this." A hush spread through the church like smoke choking out oxygen. My mother gasped, clutching my father's arm. I stared at Dave, waiting for him to take it back, to laugh and say it was a terrible joke. But his eyes flicked to Chloe again, and I knew. "I'm sorry, Stella," he said, his words hard and rehearsed. "This isn't right. It's always been Chloe. I can't marry you." My knees nearly buckled. Murmurs rose from the pews, friends whispering, some shaking their heads, others covering their mouths in disbelief. I wanted to disappear into the marble floor beneath me. My bouquet slipped from my trembling hands, roses scattering like spilled secrets. Chloe stood slowly, her heels clicking against the polished aisle as she walked toward us. She didn't glance at me, her eyes were fixed on Dave. Without hesitation, he stepped toward her, leaving me stranded at the altar in front of everyone I knew. The humiliation was unbearable. The whispers pierced me. "Poor Stella. Did you hear what he said? She must be devastated." I stared at the crucifix above the altar, silently begging for the strength not to collapse. My father reached for me, but I took a step back, unwilling to be carried like a broken thing. Dave's hand slipped into Chloe's as though it had always belonged there. My vision blurred, tears fighting their way free. He didn't just leave me. He discarded me on the most public stage of my life. The sound of Chloe's heels fading down the aisle with Dave beside her is a sound I will never forget, sharp and final like the slamming of a door on every dream I had built. I stood frozen, veil trembling, heart splintered, while people whispered apologies that did nothing to mend the shame burning through me. In that moment, it felt as if my life had ended. But deep down, though I didn't yet know it, this was only the cruel beginning of a story I never expected to live. The hours after the altar humiliation passed in a blur of muffled sobs, hushed voices, and the crushing silence of unanswered questions. I remember standing in the bridal suite, my white gown crumpled around me like a cruel joke, mascara streaking my cheeks while my mother tried to wipe away the evidence of my broken heart. Guests had left awkwardly, some patting my shoulder, others avoiding my eyes as if betrayal were contagious. But the deepest cut came later when I finally confronted Dave. I couldn't let it end with him walking out of the church hand in hand with Chloe. I needed answers, even if they ripped me apart. I found him 2 days later at his apartment, after gathering the courage to drive there. My father begged me not to, insisting I deserved more dignity than chasing after a man who had humiliated me. But dignity had already been stripped from me in front of 100 witnesses. All I had left was rage and a desperate need to know why. He opened the door reluctantly, his tie loosened, his face carrying the calmness of someone who had already made peace with destruction. Chloe's coat hung on the back of his chair. My chest tightened, but I stepped inside. "You could have told me before the wedding," I said, my voice trembling. "Why did you let me walk down that aisle?" Dave rubbed his temples, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't know how to say it, Stella. I tried, but every time I looked at you," he paused, then sighed. "You're a good person. But it wasn't right." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Not right? After years together, after planning a life, you say it wasn't right?" His jaw clenched. And then the words came, the ones that carved wounds deeper than the betrayal itself. "Stella, you've changed. You're not the girl I first met. You've put on weight and I don't feel the same attraction anymore. Chloe hasn't changed. She still looks incredible. I can't deny what I feel." The words hit me harder than a fist. My body stiffened, my breath caught. For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. But his steady gaze told me otherwise. He left me not because love had faded naturally, not because of some irreconcilable difference, but because he thought I was too fat. Because my body no longer mirrored the fantasy he wanted on his arm. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I love," I whispered, my throat raw. "And now you stand here telling me it's because of a number on a scale?" Dave shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't just that. I need someone who—" I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Someone who looks good enough for you? Someone you can parade around? That's all Chloe is to you, Dave. A trophy." He flinched but didn't deny it. That silence said more than words ever could. I left his apartment without another glance, my legs trembling so badly I barely made it to my car. The drive home was a blur of flashing traffic lights and tears streaming unchecked. His words replayed in my head, cruel and unrelenting. "Too fat, not the girl I first met, Chloe looks incredible." For weeks, I couldn't step out without feeling everyone's eyes on me, imagining whispers about my body. Even grocery store clerks or neighbors felt like judges, measuring me against Chloe's slim frame. Shame shadowed me everywhere. One evening, sitting on my couch surrounded by half-eaten takeout cartons, I caught my reflection in the darkened TV screen. My eyes were swollen, my skin pale, my posture slumped. And I hated myself, not for the weight, but for letting his words define my worth. My best friend, Sophia Bennett, came over a few days later. She wrapped me in her arms and let me cry until my body gave out. Then she said something that planted the first fragile seed of change. "Stella, his cruelty says more about him than about you. You deserve someone who sees your soul first. But if his words broke you, then take them and turn them into fire. Not for him, not for Chloe, for yourself." Her voice lingered long after she left. For weeks, it gnawed at the edges of my despair. Perhaps I couldn't erase what Dave had done, but maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim the pieces of myself he had shattered. That was the moment when my healing truly began, though I had no idea that Chloe, the woman who replaced me, was carrying secrets of her own, secrets that would soon bring Dave to his knees. In the months that followed, the echo of Dave's rejection lingered like a wound that refused to close. But time has a strange way of peeling back layers of truth we don't expect. And the truth about Chloe Harrington began to surface in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized was laid out in front of me. First, I tried to avoid everything about them. I muted mutual friends on social media, ignored wedding gossip, and shut myself away from places where their names might surface. But small-town whispers don't vanish easily. Even in a city like ours, word traveled. And soon I began hearing things, subtle, careless remarks from acquaintances who thought they were being helpful. Did you know Chloe showed up at her ex's office last week? Caused quite a scene. She's been digging through Dave's old emails. Something about money, I think. Funny how she suddenly appeared right before the wedding. The more I heard, the more unsettled I became. I had known Chloe in passing during college. She was ambitious, sharp-tongued, and always carried an aura of hunger, as though life owed her something. She and Dave had been explosive back then, constant breakups and reconciliations, fueled by a mix of lust and toxic fights. When he finally left her, I remember people saying Chloe swore she'd never forgive him. So why had she returned now, years later, just in time to ruin my life? One evening, unable to sleep, I met Sophia for coffee. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice. "Tella, I don't think Chloe loves Dave. I think she's playing a longer game." Her words startled me. "What do you mean?" Sophia sipped her drink. "I overheard at a charity dinner, Chloe's family lost everything in some business scandal last year. She's desperate for status again. Dave's wealthy, successful, and still gullible when it comes to her. Don't you see? She came back not for love, but for revenge and survival." The idea lodged in my chest like a thorn. Could it be true? Had Dave left me at the altar for someone who never intended to stay? Weeks turned into months, and the rumors intensified. Friends mentioned fights between Dave and Chloe, explosive arguments at restaurants, public tears followed by passionate reconciliations. It was a cycle I recognized all too well, except this time I was watching from the outside. Then came the night of confirmation. I was leaving a late shift from work when I spotted Ethan Walker, a mutual acquaintance, waiting at the bus stop. Ethan was kind, steady, the sort of person who noticed details others missed. We fell into conversation, and eventually he hesitated before saying, "Stella, I think you should know. Chloe's been talking. She's been boasting, actually, about how she's going to ruin Dave's reputation. She's planning something big." I froze. Ruin him? Why? Ethan shook his head. Apparently, she never forgave him for how things ended years ago. She said she wanted him to suffer the way she did. Marrying him was never her endgame, it was about destruction. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. All the pieces clicked into place, the timing of her return, her relentless grip on him, the chaos surrounding them. She wasn't there out of love. She was there to dismantle him from within. For the first time, a strange sense of relief crept into my heart. Not joy, never joy, because the betrayal was still raw, but vindication. Dave had thrown me away for a woman who wasn't there to build a future, but to burn his to ashes. Months later, news broke publicly. Articles circulated about financial scandals, accusations of fraud linked to Chloe's manipulations, and whispers that Dave's once spotless reputation was in tatters. I saw the headlines flash across my phone screen, and my heart pounded, not from sadness but from the realization that truth has a way of catching up, no matter how carefully people try to bury it. One night, Sophia called me, her voice buzzing with barely contained energy. "Have you seen the news? Chloe drained his accounts, exposed his business dealings, and left him for a wealthy investor overseas. She destroyed him, Stella. Completely." I sat in stunned silence, the weight of it pressing down on me. Dave had traded my love for a mirage, and now he was paying the price. Chloe's revenge had been executed with precision, and he never saw it coming. And though part of me still ached, another part felt a quiet strength rising. For so long, I had wondered if his leaving meant I was unworthy, if his cruel words defined me. But now I saw clearly, it wasn't me who was lacking. It was him who had chosen a path paved with lies and betrayal. That clarity became the first solid stone in the foundation of my healing. And from that stone I would begin to rebuild, not for Dave, not in competition with Chloe, but for myself. Through the headlines about Dave and Chloe erupted, I spent nights lying awake, the glow of my phone screen illuminating article after article. Their story unfolded like a scandalous soap opera, Chloe draining his savings, exposing his shady business dealings, then vanishing with a wealthy investor overseas. People who once admired Dave whispered now with pity or contempt. He had become a cautionary tale. Oddly, that chaos outside gave me room to breathe inside. For months, I had been drowning in shame, carrying his words about my body like invisible chains. But watching his downfall reminded me that betrayal was not my identity, it was his weakness. Chloe's revenge stripped away the illusion that he had ever been the winner in leaving me. Till I was far from whole. My reflection in the mirror told a story of exhaustion, grief, and neglect. My cheeks were hollow not from weight loss but from sleepless nights. My posture slumped as though the world itself pressed down on me. Something had to change, not just physically but in every part of my life. Sophia was the first to nudge me toward healing. She dragged me out for walks, even when I protested. "Fresh air isn't optional," she said one evening as we strolled through the park. "You've been indoors too long, Stella. The movement is medicine." First, I hated it, the burn in my legs, the sting of cold air on my skin. But gradually something shifted. Each step loosened the grip of despair, each breath reminded me that I was still alive. Soon I found myself craving those walks, adding minutes each day until they became small victories I clung to. From there, I joined a fitness class at the local gym. The first day was humiliating. I tripped over my own feet, sweat dripping into my eyes, surrounded by toned bodies that seemed to move effortlessly. But instead of quitting, I returned. I returned because for the first time the pain felt productive, not destructive. Finn Walker, who had quietly become a friend during my darkest weeks, noticed the change. One afternoon, he found me in the gym lobby tying my sneakers. "You've got fire in your eyes again," he said with a grin. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. It's not fire. It's survival. But survival blossomed into something bigger. I began cooking real meals instead of drowning in takeout, rediscovering flavors that nourished rather than numbed. I signed up for therapy sessions where I poured out the tangled mess of self-doubt and humiliation and slowly, piece by piece, learned to replace shame with self-compassion. Weight began to come off, not in a dramatic movie scene way but steadily, a pound at a time. My clothes fit differently, my energy surged, and one day, while trying on an old dress, I caught my reflection and gasped. Not because I looked slim, but because I saw myself again, eyes bright, shoulders square, smile real. Healing wasn't only about my body. I explored hobbies I had long abandoned, painting canvases that splattered my apartment with color, journaling late into the night, rediscovering the joy of creating rather than collapsing. I even traveled, just a short trip to the coast, but standing on the shore, feeling waves crash at my feet, I realized I was finally stepping into my own life again. Transformation was gradual, fragile at first, but undeniable. People began to notice. At a reunion months later, old friends blinked in surprise at the confident woman who walked in. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "I told you." Fire. Even Dave noticed. He reached out once, his voice thick with regret. "Stella, I made a mistake. Chloe, she ruined me. I should have stayed with you." The old me would have shattered hearing those words, desperate to prove myself. But the new me only felt a calm detachment. "No, Dave," I told him, my voice steady. "You didn't make a mistake. You made your choice. And I made mine, to become someone stronger without you." Hanging up the phone that night, I realized my healing was no longer about proving anything to him, or even to Chloe. It was about reclaiming the woman I was always meant to be. And that woman wasn't defined by betrayal, rejection, or cruel words. She was defined by resilience, courage, and the ability to rise. The day I realized I had fully stepped into a new chapter of my life wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no tearful speeches, no grand gestures. It was an ordinary Saturday morning. Sunlight spilled through my apartment window, warm and golden, and I caught myself humming as I brewed coffee. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. That simple, unshakable peace was the truest sign of victory. My body had changed, yes. Months of discipline had sculpted a version of me that was stronger, leaner, healthier. Clothes fit in ways they hadn't in years. Strangers smiled at me in gyms and parks, some even asking for tips on routines I had once dreaded myself. But the real transformation wasn't visible in mirrors, it pulsed from within me. I was no longer the woman whose worth was tethered to the approval of a man. I had learned to be enough for myself. Sophia noticed it first. Over dinner one evening, she raised her glass of wine toward me. "To Stella," she said with a grin. To the woman who walked through fire and came out blazing brighter than ever. Her words made my chest swell with gratitude. Friends had stood by me, even when I had been too broken to stand for myself. And now, sitting at that table, laughter bubbling around us, I felt a belonging that had nothing to do with marriage or status. Finn, too, had been a constant presence. He never pushed, never asked for more than I could give, but his quiet encouragement had been a lifeline. One evening after a group workout, as we stretched on the grass, he looked at me and said, "You know, Stella, you've become someone people look up to. You turned pain into something powerful." "That's rare." I smiled, touched by his sincerity. "I didn't set out to inspire anyone," I admitted. "I just didn't want to drown." "And that," he replied, "is exactly why people will follow your example." Life wasn't perfect. There were still lonely nights, still echoes of old wounds when I stumbled across photos of weddings or happy couples. But instead of despair, I felt resilience. I had built a foundation strong enough to withstand those shadows. The ultimate test came unexpectedly. Months after Chloe vanished and Dave's life unraveled, I crossed paths with him at a cafe. He looked worn, older somehow, as though regret had etched itself into every line of his face. His suit was wrinkled, his posture slumped. When his eyes met mine, surprise flickered, then shame. "Stella," he said quietly, almost reverently. "You look incredible." The old sting threatened to rise, but it dissolved in the calm certainty of who I had become. I didn't need his validation anymore. His compliment was meaningless against the fortress of strength I had built. "Thank you, Dave," I said simply. "I hope you find peace." And with that, I turned and walked away, the clink of my heels echoing like punctuation at the end of a chapter one had finally finished. From there, life expanded. I pursued dreams I had shelved, launched a small wellness blog where I shared my journey, and received messages from strangers who said my story gave them courage. The more I poured into others, the more fulfilled I became. Healing had given me back not only my self-respect but also my purpose. Victory wasn't about revenge or proving Dave wrong. It wasn't about Chloe's downfall, though that had played its part in exposing the truth. Victory was about me rising from ashes, rebuilding with bricks of resilience, and discovering that the woman I became was stronger than the one who once stood trembling at an altar. And so, my story no longer ended with betrayal, it ended with renewal. With a woman who had been broken but not destroyed. With Stella Maris, reborn into a life that was hers alone to shape. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this video please, and share to your loved ones.